Well, good morning, everyone. This is John Craig, and I will be joined here shortly with my co host. But you are now listening to Monday's edition of Let Us Reason Together here on Lamb Radio. And I'm so glad that you are joining me today. So it is one of those days that this is the day that the Lord has made, and we shall rejoice and be glad in it. I am your second day of the week host, and I'm glad to be here. Been out for the last couple of weeks, and so I'm glad to be back with you all. So this is based off of Isaiah 118, which states, "Come now and let us reason together, says the Lord. Though your sins are as scarlet, they will be as white as snow. Though they are red like crimson, they will be like wool." So this is where we sit down and reason out current events, cultural shifts, and of course, this week's Torah portion. We can either push back or push through. Nevertheless, if iron does not sharpen iron, sparks will never fly, let alone ever get a fire going. And without a little heat and a good midrash, how will our hearts ever get soft and moldable enough to be transformed in the way that the Spirit, the Ruach, wants us to be? Today is Monday, January the 7th of 2019. It is the first day of the 11th month of Shabbat in the Hebrew year 5779. Yes, it's Rosh Chodesh. And so it's good to have a new moon, new month. It's a time for a new celebration of life. And that's what it's all about, the cycle of life. Hey, so this is an interactive show. We have the chat room open right now. And so join us in the chat room. Let us know what you're thinking, what your comments are, and participate with us in this endeavor that we've got going on today. But as we move forward, hey, today is Nothing is Impossible Day. That's right. Nothing is impossible. So, and I think that's what Yeshua actually reminded us of, that with all things are possible with God. It's also the All Snubbies Day. All Snubbies Day. Now, what in the world is that? Well, I had to look up what a snubby is, and the first thing that I came across is that is another term for a short-barreled revolver. So it's the All Snubbies Day. So if you've got the 5 or 6 shot revolver, maybe it's a good time to take that out to the range and make sure it's in good working order. And it's also Search for Wise Solutions Day. It's a good day to be looking for wise solutions. I think the first place to look for wise solution is the Word, and that's where we go to get our inspiration for the day. How about Self-Admiration Day? Self-Admiration Day. Well, that seems kind of, Self-Admiration Day. Well, I'm just trying to think of something here. Sometimes we need to keep things in perspective. Let's just put it that way. And it's off the everyday drudge day. Off the everyday drudge day. Are you in a rut? Well, maybe this is one of those days that it's time to get out of the rut, to get out of the everyday drudge of life and bring some inspiration back into your life. How's that sound? Maybe get the snubby out and go to the range. Who knows? Who knows? Well, that's it. Those are just some thoughts. Here's some other things that are happening today that they call holidays. How about it's Die Staff Day? How about it's Harlem Globetrotters Day? Harlem Globetrotters Day. And how about this? I'm not going to take it anymore because it's no longer going to be a drudge. That's the type of day it is. International Programmers Day, National Thank God It's Monday Day. It's National Bobblehead Day and National Old Rock Day. And for all of you, well, how should I say this? That's really an inspirational way to say this. It's National Pass Gas Day. Yeah, let's just not hold it in any longer. A little crassness there. Forgive me. Let's move on. How about National Weigh-In Day? It's Orthodox Christmas Day, and And those are some things that are being celebrated or recognized as today. Yeah, I don't come up with these things. I just go and research it out, and there you have it. Those are things that are happening today. How about some things this week? It's Celebration of Life Week. It's Lose Weight and Feel Great Week. And it's National Law Enforcement Training Week and National Thank Your Customers week. So those are some things that are taking place this week. How about the positive quote of the day? We've got from Benjamin Franklin, positive quote of the day: energy and persistence conquer all things. And then funny quote of the day from Mae West. Now, what would Mae West come up with that's funny? Well, how about this? Save a boyfriend for a rainy day and another in case it doesn't rain. Yep, that's Mae West for you. And love quote of the day from Elizabeth Ashley: absence does not make the heart grow fonder, but it sure heats up the blood. So there you go. Some things to be considering. I have the verse of the day from our Haftarah portion, Jeremiah 46:27. But as for you, O Jacob, my servant, do not fear nor be dismayed, O Israel. For see, I'm going to save you from afar, and your descendants from the land of their captivity. And Jacob will return and be undisturbed and secure, and with no one making him tremble. So how do you like that? I like that. It's also attached to the next verse, verse 28. O Jacob, my servant, do not fear, declares Yahweh, for I am with you. For I will make a full end of all the nations where I have driven you. Yet I will not make a full end of you, but I will correct you properly, and by no means leave you unpunished. And those are the promises of Yahweh. I take great heart in those things, especially in the day and the hour that we're living in, when we're saying, come, O Yeshua. Bo Yeshua come. Bo Yeshua Bo. I think that's part of our Torah portion. Bo, which means come or go. It means both of those things. But we want a visitation, and more than anything, to carry us through the day. So things that are happening on this day in history: January 7th in 1920, 5 duly elected socialist assemblymen are denied by the New York State Assembly. Wow, things have really changed in 100 years because, my goodness, they have elected socialists now into our Congress. But back 100 years ago, they were denied access to the New York State Assembly. And that's where some of our socialists have come from. And then in 1927, you know why it's Globetrotters Day? It's because in 1927, Harlem Globetrotters play their first game in Hinckley, Illinois. And here's some other things of our less memories of the past that we don't really want to remember. Well, in 1988, on this day, January 7th, former White House intern Monica Lewinsky signs an affidavit denying she had an affair with President Clinton. But 1 year later, in 1999, the impeachment trial of President Bill Clinton begins in the U.S. Senate. Now, why did I bring this up today? Well, because these things are all over the news, because Bill Clinton was actually doing things in office that really upset the American people by doing some lewd things within the Oval Office. And now here, because certain people do not like the duly elected president of the United States, they're bringing up charges of impeachment against President Trump, who was duly elected and has what I believe are all false allegations against our seated president, but it's simply because of a political agenda to try to remove our president from the office. But that's what's happening in this day in history. How about famous birthdays? Well, I left the famous birthdays off the list today. We're going to move on to that. And joining me shortly, I do have my co-hosts. They are shortly going to be here, but I'm going to hit the lighter side of things as I'm waiting for them to join me. And so some wit for the day. Let's untwist your brain and point some points to ponder. So these are 10. Now, this is how it titles it: Very Funny Tales of Weird People You Couldn't Make Up. You can't make it up. So here's some very funny tales. So let's see how funny these are. Number one, police in Wichita, Kansas arrested a 22-year-old man at an airport hotel after he tried to pass, get this, 2 counterfeit $16 bills. Nope, can't make that one up. Tried to pass 2 $16 bills. Oh my goodness. How about this? Number 2, a man in Johannesburg, South Africa, shot his 49-year-old friend in the face, seriously wounding him. Now get this, while the two practiced shooting beer cans. Now wait for it. As the two were practicing shooting beer cans off of each other's head. Oh my goodness. Can you believe that? Yes, you can't make this up. How about number 3? A company trying to continue its 5-year perfect safety record showed its workers a film aimed at encouraging the use of safety goggles on the job. According to Industrial Machinery News, the film's depiction of gory industrial accidents was so graphic that 25 workers suffered minor injuries in their rush to leave the screening room. 13 others fainted, and one man required 7 stitches after he cut his head falling off of a chair while watching the film. Oh my goodness. Yes. So much for the 5-year perfect safety record. Number 4, the Chico, California City Council enacted a ban on nuclear weapons. Yep, setting a $500 fine for anyone detonating one within the city limits. Can I make that up? Oh, and who would be around left to find the person detonating that nuclear weapon? Oh my goodness. Well, it's only wisdom from our great wisdom from our great government people, from the city council all the way up to the national government. Talk about weird stuff. How about this? A bus carrying 5 passengers was hit by a car in St. Louis, Missouri. But by the time police arrived on the scene, 14 pedestrians had boarded the bus and had begun to complain of whiplash injuries and back pain. Do you realize that happens more than we actually think? That yes, there are people that board buses involved in accidents saying that they were there and injured that were never there at the time of the accident. It happens. I'm in the insurance claims industry. It happens. And then how about this? Swedish business consultant Ulf af Troll labored for 13 years on a book about Swedish economic solutions. Swedish economic solutions. He took the 250-page manuscript to be copied. Yes, 250 pages. 13 years developing this book, only to have it reduced to 50,000 strips of paper in seconds when a worker confused the copier with the shredder. Can't make that up. Number 7, a convict broke out of jail in Washington, D.C., then a few days later accompanied his girlfriend to her trial for robbery. At lunch, he went out for a sandwich. She needed to see him and thus had him paged. Police officers recognized his name and arrested him as he returned to the courthouse in a car he had stolen. Yes, he had stolen over the lunch hour. Wow. Not all, can't say all convicts are the sharpest people, but there you go. That's what's going on. Number 8, police in Radnor, Pennsylvania interrogated a suspect by placing a metal colander on his head. and connecting it with wires to a photocopy machine. Oh my goodness. Get this. Police interrogated a suspect by placing a metal colander on his head, connecting it with wires to a photocopy machine. The message, "He's lying," was placed in the copier, and the police pressed the copy button each time they thought the suspect wasn't telling the truth. Believing the lie detector, quote unquote, the lie detector, was working, the suspect confessed. It's true. It's true. Police in Radnor, Pennsylvania. There you go. Like I said, not the brightest guys on the block. Okay, when two service station attendants in Ionia, Michigan. Ionia, Michigan. There you go. Michigan people can correct me on that. Refused to hand over the cash to an inebriated robber. The man threatened to call the police. They still refused. So the robber called the police and was arrested. And the last one, a Los Angeles man who later said he was tired of walking, stole a steamroller and led police on a 5-mile-per-hour chase until an officer stepped aboard and brought the vehicle to a stop. Yes, it's true. These things, you just can't make these things up. This is about the weird things that happen in today's life, and I'm telling you, oh my goodness, we have some really, really odd things that are happening in our world. Can you believe it? Oh my goodness. Well, I am waiting over here for my co-host to join me, and I had a note here from one saying he's just running a few minutes behind, so waiting for, and the other one has joined me, but he's just not on screen. Tom, are you there this morning? Looking for Tom Collins and just checking to see if you are there. So he's got his camera on, and but he's off screen right now. So Tom, when you can join me, I'll be glad to have you. So here's some things that that we're going to be talking about this morning in our Haftarah portion. We've got that being brought to us from Jeremiah 46, 13 through 28. And our Torah portion is Bo, which means come. And that's Exodus 10, 1 through 13, 16. So in our Brit Hadashah as John 19, 31 through 37. I just want to stop and pause right now. Thank you for y'all that are joining us in the chat room. I haven't been able to check the chats right now, but I'm glad that you are with me and that you're being part of the conversation. And we are having a little bit of connection, so we're going to continue on. Let me jump on over to the article for today. And so our article today is, I got this out of naturalnews.com. So naturalnews.com. And this I thought was very interesting considering the political climate that's going on today, and considering the things that have happened in the past and things that are going on concerning our government. And this is, the title of the article is, FBI won't run honest investigation of Hillary Clinton's crimes, but is tripping over itself to investigate the theft of files that might expose the truth about 9/11. So the FBI, think about this. They're not wanting to run an honest investigation. So let's go back and look at some of the things that have happened over the last couple of years. We've had over 30,000 emails that Hillary Clinton had in the State Department sent to her private server. They also went and had access not only to Hillary Clinton, but by Hubert Aberdeen, who was her assistant. And these emails, many of which were classified emails, which makes it a federal offense. First off, it's a federal. I think it is a crime just to take your emails that are property of the United States government, actually the people of the United States, and then put them on a private server where the people of the United States are not able to access those from a FOIA request or a Freedom of Information request. So we know that was an issue. And James Comey, when he was head of the FBI, bypassed any legal advice from the Department of Justice, or actually maybe under the advice of the Department of Justice. They decided to call that whole thing a matter. And they did, and not a crime or an investigation or anything like that. So the FBI refused to investigate any of that, but now it's tripping all over itself to investigate the theft of files that might expose the truth about 9/11. So let's go back and look at some of the things and look what the implications of this is. First off, going back to 9/11, a lot of people say, oh, it's conspiracy theory to think that the towers were brought down by nefarious reasons, but that other than what the government narrative is, which was that terrorists brought them down by flying one airplane into each tower. And so by having that type of narrative, or diverting from that type of narrative, you're considered a conspiracy theorist. And in fact, the whole thing about conspiracy theorists really was inflated to really discredit any type of investigation into any matter that is not the official narrative. You can take that all the way back to the JFK investigation. So this article is talking about an underground hacking collective known as the Dark Overlord. And they announced on New Year's Eve that it is now in possession of 18,000 documents related to the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks. Critical information that because it could potentially blow the lid on 9/11 being an inside job, has prompted the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation to launch an urgent investigation. Even as the same corrupt FBI refused to pursue justice against felonious traitor Hillary Clinton, federal authorities are now actively pursuing these anonymous would-be whistleblowers, which claim they will sell the documents in exchange for Bitcoin. So let me go back and explain who Dark Overlord is. First off, it sounds like a really nefarious group, and when I do have an issue with them wanting to blackmail and try to for money that in order to keep these things hidden. Blackmailing is wrong, and that's an issue. But Dark Overlord, as you can actually decrypt that, as means overlord as one who has oversight or one that is watching over, and dark, reversing it in order, overwatching and exposing darkness is really, from what I've understood, that the decryption of that title is the Dark Overlord. So they're watching over where the darkness is and bringing it and exposing it. How they're doing it, I don't necessarily agree with, but let's go on and look at it a little bit more. And it says that according to two people familiar with the matter, the Dark Overlord group possesses both emails and non-disclosure agreements concerning 9/11 that were sent and received by insurers such as Hiscox and Lloyd's of London, both of which deny that they suffered security breach in relation to the theft. Also mentioned as one of the sources of stolen documents is law firm Blackwell Sanders Pieper Martin, now called Hush Blackwell. The announcement by the Dark Overlord further invites ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and various other nation states to bid on the documents online, insinuating that whomever offers to pay the most Bitcoin will gain exclusive access to the stolen documents. And, they're saying, pay up or we're going to bury you with this. The Dark Overlord is and they did use vulgarity. I did clean that up. It says, if you continue to fail us, we'll escalate these releases by releasing the keys. Each time a layer is opening, a new wave of liability will fall upon you, the letter adds. And going on, it talks about how the Dark Overlord has already released a handful of decryption keys and apparently unlocked private conversations about the World Trade Center that took place among a cohort of entities that we're guessing probably don't want their identities publicly revealed, which would explain the Dark Overlord's demand for bribery money in exchange for secrecy. If, and it quotes this, if you're one of the dozens of solicitor firms who was involved in the litigation, a politician who was involved in the case, a law enforcement agency who was involved in the investigations, a property management firm, an investment bank, a client of a client, a reference of a reference, a global insurer, or whoever else, you're welcome to contact our email below and make a request to formally have your documents and materials withdrawn from the eventual public release of the materials, the demand letter adds. However, you'll be paying us. Interestingly enough, the Dark Overlord says it's been under investigations for many years now, particularly after it obtained key information about Larry Silverstein, the former owner of the World Trade Center complex, who infamously stated on video that a decision was made to pull it after the buildings came down that fateful day. So we've got a lot of different things here to kind of put on the board and kind of talk about is first off, what documentation would they have that actually would bring things to light? Are the conspiracies true that have talked about how insurance policies were put on these buildings before they came down prior to 9/11? There were other players that are involved. It talks about different spy agencies are involved in this. I mean, there's a lot of different things that are being brought to the table, as well as a 9/11 grand jury has been impaneled in New York to look and investigate this matter. The first time in all these years, 18 years, that a panel has actually sat down to look and investigate this. I mean, of course, we've got different things of terrorists that allegedly brought the planes down, and their passports in the midst of all the rubble were found without any type of damage to them. How could that have actually happened? How could the American people actually follow through and believe these things? And if the towers did not come down because of terrorist attacks, but they came down for other reasons, perhaps to get us into war, to create a war, which Dick Cheney says would be a 100-year war, and we're still having troops in the Middle East because of this, then what does that mean to the families involved? The families that were killed, the families that have lost loved ones in the Middle East, those that are still serving over there, the whole purpose of us being over there, and has it all been made up? These are all questions that actually come to the table when we look at this. And so whether or not the nefarious bribery and blackmailing of Dark Overlord against the people that have these emails, it's really causing us to dig in, to look into what are the truths about 9/11, perhaps to reopen this again and say, are there things that have been held from us that we need to investigate a little bit more? So I've got Tom Collins with me today. Good morning, Tom.
Shalom Aleichem, and how that is a timely subject with what's going on with all this intrigue and darkness. And I was just looking at a section here in Ephesians 4 about that, but I'd like to mention that years ago I heard a remarkable bulletin that came out and was suppressed thereafter, that the chief architect of the Twin Towers explained that the way those Twin Towers were structured, they would not pancake like they did with the striking of those jet aircraft to the towers. But the way the heat was generated would have had to been some kind of internal demolition activity. Now, this, speaking of conspiracy, the world's leader in demolition of buildings is the Loiseau brothers in France. Now, it's remarkable with what that chief architect said, and I won't linger this too long because I think it's appropriate. All that's going on right now was directly spoken of in principle in the book of Ephesians. But the Lozeau brothers actually were the ones who were contracted to go in and clean up, which was not their normal activity. It was demolition of buildings, clean up all that happened at ground zero, as they called it, with the two towers. Now, that being said, there was an appearance of controlled demolition that did not destroy the towers earlier, when that blind sheik was orchestrating an earlier attack on the World Trade Center. And there was, in fact, evidence that there was controlled demolition, but that was shut up. In other words, sequential, just boom, 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 right down the line with charges placed when there was supposedly some evaluation assessment of the structural stability. But then the explosions occurred. The basement was decimated, if you remember the report that occurred a number of years before 9/11. Well, after those towers fell, there wasn't anyone allowed in there at that point except the Lozeau brothers. They are world experts in setting sequential demolition charges, where you've seen these buildings where this tremendous amount of smoke and rubble rises up, but the buildings around them are relatively unscathed. I saw one in Dallas with the old cotton exchange that they did, and it was remarkable how they were able to sequentially bring that building down story by story. It was a massive old building, and yet the other buildings around them were virtually unscathed. So from that standpoint alone, from the structural damage, the way it occurred compared to where it was characterized in the press as the jet fuel and the heat of that and the impact is what brought the towers down. And if you remember, they didn't just topple over, they went down in sequential order to the bottom.
Yes.
So again, you have, when I became friends by, I think, a divine appointment with Colonel James Bogrice. He was the one that the movies with Sylvester Stallone, Rambo, were patterned after. And he'd learned there was a profound drug conspiracy that was going on, and he tried to expose it when he was looking for MIAs and prisoners, POWs, in Southeast Asia. And he wrote 2 books on it, and they put a gag order on him and a gag order on a gag order. We couldn't even supposedly tell the public that he had a federal gag order. But he, being a fearless soul, who I was privileged to help him see the reality of his Mormon background, it was further to understand about Yeshua, and the Sabbath, and the holy days. And he's, the last I knew, was fully informed and operating and functioning and worshiping in that fashion. Not that I'm that smart or spiritual, but it was just a divine appointment. And he brought forth remarkable things to me personally, above and beyond the 2 books that he put out, about it's hard to believe that men could be so evil. And so you mentioned the word, John, darkness. It could be that dark. But then again, he reminded me of what it says in Jeremiah 17:9. The worst of Adamic nature is the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. And who indeed can know it? And you read in the Psalms that the wicked, many of them, they can't sleep at night unless they're scheming some new dark, evil plan. Now, Paul writes to the brethren at the assembly at Ephesus, and he says in Ephesians 4 and verse 8, "For you were once darkness, but now you are the light in Yahweh. Walk as children of light, for the fruit of the light results in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, discerning what is pleasing to Yahweh." Don't participate in the fruitless works of darkness, but instead expose them. I believe there's people like Bo Grice that didn't have the stomach to continue on aiding and abetting some of the evil plans in our government, and had the courage to be a whistleblower and stand up. And we read in Hebrews that in the last days, everything's going to be shaken. And that's not just tectonically, earthquakes, that which cannot be shaken is actually, when the dust settles under the influence of the Almighty, is going to remain. And indeed, here it says, we're supposed to be discerning what is pleasing to Yahweh. Don't participate in the fruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. For it is shameful to even talk about what is done by them in secret. Everything exposed by the light is made clear. For what makes everything clear is light. And therefore, it goes on talking about waking up sleepers. And there are people that have been asleep at the switch or in the matrix or whatever. And by the power, I think, of the Holy Spirit, some of them indeed are waking up. And it is causing a frenzy among those that are these controllers, the rich men of the earth and all of that, that think that they're going to prevail. And we know, according to Scripture, they're going to go down so bad.
Yes. And when I was thinking about this, not only did those two towers come down, but they also had the building number, I think it was building number 7, also came down. They said it was damaged and possibly on fire because of the first 2 buildings that came down, but it was rather minor. And there was a BBC reporter that actually reported before the building came down that it was coming down. Well, how did that reporter actually know that it was coming down, other than that the news media had been tipped off that more was going to happen? And when that building came down, it also fell down on its own footprint. And I've thought about this so many different times and looking at the videos where the 2 airplanes strike the buildings. And I've often wondered this: why do we not see any airplane parts? When one of the pictures shows the wing extending out over the edge of the building, and I think if you look at those airplanes, their wingspan was pretty wide. Why was not part of a wing actually falling down into the city below? But it just seemed to disappear. And so there's a lot of questions that perhaps the revealing of these truths, these emails, the correspondence, these things that dark overlord is threatening to release, perhaps will actually bring these things to light. One other thing, think about this. This is 2019. There are young people in this that have grown up in the age of terror, and that they're 18 years old. They're graduating from high school now. This is all they've ever known because of what happened on 9/11. Their whole lives have been affected. And if it was not truly from terrorism, from radical Muslim extremists that had some type of thing against the American people, that they want, Osama bin Laden and all of that sort of stuff, if that's not the case and it's a lie, think about all of the history that these young people have ever learned, that they were taught that it's all terrorism, and then they've been bred and they've been groomed to rise up through think about this, the video games that are all about war, about killing. They're desensitized to the killing, to the war, to make them warriors, to put them back out in the battlefield to fight this war on terror that perhaps never was there. It was just generated because of the certain secret spy agencies trying to stir things up for the military industrial complex. Think about how life really changes if it all starts to come out and begins to be proven as an act against of the United States, perhaps other agencies of other nations, in order to stir this up. What damage is that going to do to our culture and our society? Actually, it'll be the beginning of healing, in my opinion. But think about the fallout that's going to take place. James, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. We were kind of talking about something last week, and I thought I'd bring it up. Isaiah 9, if we go to Isaiah, it's called the Isaiah 9:10 judgment is what they wrote a book about it. But it actually says the bricks are falling down, but we will rebuild with hewn stones. The sycamores are cut down, but we will change them into cedars. Therefore, Yahweh shall set up an adversary of resin against him and join his enemies together, the Syrians before. But something very interesting. Let's go back to 9:10. The bricks are falling down. We know that on 9/11, the towers fell, okay? And we will rebuild with hewn stones. We have to understand that I think his name is Tom Daschle. He was a senator. He got up and read this verse after 9/11. He got up, and the whole point of this verse is a people turning back to Yahweh, a people repenting, a people who have a heart and say, we're not going to rebuild it. We're going to let Yahweh do his thing now. But instead of doing that, Tom Daschle got up and read this verse and actually said, we're going to rebuild. We're going to build it taller. We're going to build it bigger. And that's what they did. And the thing is that they actually used these stones. And when it says we'll rebuild with hewn stones, they use these really fancy stones to rebuild it. Also, something very important is that basically the whatchamacallit used to be in DC, or not in DC, it used to be in New York, the capital. Okay. George Washington actually prayed underneath the sycamore tree that fell. He actually gave his inaugurational speech underneath the sycamore tree, which fell during 9/11. It fell in the church. And you know what they replaced this sycamore tree with? A cedar tree. And they called it the tree of hope. And they tried everything to keep this tree alive, and it died. And they literally were bringing in specialists to keep this tree alive. And something else is important is, guess where this tree, the roots are of the sycamore tree? They're sitting on Wall Street. They've actually put them in a case, and they've got the roots. This artist made a thing out of them. This whole thing, everything that's happening, Solomon said, what happened before will happen again. And I truly believe that this was a warning to America, that and just as George Washington said, if America ever turns its back on God, it will be the end of a nation as we know it. And guess what? We've turned our back on Yahweh. And we are looking at the destruction of a nation. And it started with 9/11. We've lost all our freedoms. Everything since 9/11, we've given away our freedoms for security over and over and over again. But it's something to look into. There's a lot of articles about the things that went on during 9/11 and how they relate to the book of Isaiah, especially this Isaiah 9:10 judgment. And just to how everything went down, the fact that they're reading this saying, we're going to rebuild, we're going to make it stronger. No, repent, turn back to Yahweh. Teshuvah is what it should have been, and it wasn't. But that's kind of what I've got, but it's a good topic. Yeah. I may be off a little bit because I did just run late, but hey.
No, you're good, James. Thank you.
James, you've given a wonderful synopsis of our wonderful Messianic brother, Jonathan Cahn, in his book, The Harbinger. You gave the fast overview, cliff notes in a sense, not to be flippant, of what he brought out very meticulously to show all that you're saying is going down, including this major problem with our economy and the stock market that's intimately involved with the fact that our God, in many ways, has become mammon. And that's brought out in that book as well as his new book that has to do, ironically, with Ahab and Jezebel, and a direct parallel with what's happened with William Jefferson Clinton and Hillary Rodham Clinton with that real estate deal they have, and what happened with Ahab and Jezebel, and the ultimate outcome of that. And I think it's his latest book. It's called Paradigm. But we have insights because we're promised the fourth parameter of the Holy Spirit in John 16 is the Ruach. The Spirit will, in fact, show us revelation, show us things to come.
Yes, absolutely. I tell you what, I really have to take this back and say, look at the signs of judgment that have come upon our nation since 9/11. A lot of people say, well, it's a sign of judgment that this terrorist attack had happened on the World Trade Center. Well, I'm going to say, yeah, it was a terrorist attack. It may not have necessarily been from radical Islamic Muslims. But could very well have been from insiders within our own government and other governments around the world in order to disrupt it was the trade center. It disrupted the financial trades of the world. The impact economically on it was devastating that year. In fact, I worked for Progressive Insurance at that time. That was the year that it so affected our business that we usually had some type of gain sharing at the end of the year. We didn't get anything that year. It devastated the profits of that insurance business as well as many other insurance business. According to this article, the 2017 equivalent costs of the hit from these attacks was $45 billion. And so it affected, it was worldwide. But then, James, as you were alluding to, and you were talking about, Tom, the Harbinger, how it affected economy. We went to war. war is a sign of judgment, going to war like that, then the economy affected in 2007, 2008, 2009. And then again, now we have a new type of judgment that's affecting the United States, and that is this rush to our southern border by invaders from the south, which this whole ideal of the government shutdown is all about, where it's all about a wall, where they wanted a wall before, but they don't want a wall now. So why? Because they want to allow invaders to come on into this nation. The same type of people that said, we will rebuild, are the same type of people are saying, let all these people come and flood our nation. That'll end up driving down wages and increasing crime and additional terrorism, honestly, here within our nation, because they're catching terrorists at the border. They're catching criminals at the border. They're catching gang members at the border, and they're stopping disease at the border. I mean, all sorts of different things that are going on. So these are all signs of judgment. Now, one other question I have for you all. The way that it's being brought about through dark overlord by blackmail, what do y'all think about that? The truth needs to come out, but what's up with that? Tom, what are your thoughts?
Well, I do think about one of the categories of evil that's spoken of in the Brit Kaddish of the New Testament is a category known as extortioners. Those that through terror, through influence, through power, bring forth just a moment, pardon. They bring forth, excuse me, my dear wife's actually stepping in here. I'm surprised to see her. Just a moment. What we're dealing with here is extortion on a grand scale. Now, I got to scroll back a little bit because we're going to get in the Torah here in a while, but in the portion of curses in Deuteronomy 28, very much in tune with what's happening at our border, with our own president saying, if we don't have a security of our border, then we don't have a country. We don't have a sovereign nation.
And that's true.
He has stated that so emphatically, and it's caused, regrettably, those of the progressive, extra liberal portion of the Democrats primarily, and this is no big paean saying the Republicans aren't with their lacking in willingness to have e-verify for terrified, many cases, immigrants that are here that are afraid they're going to get busted and exported, and they keep on hiring them, and they don't want to e-verify, among many business people that are Republican oriented. So you got to have a balanced approach here. But we see in Deuteronomy 28 a curse, and it says the alien among you will rise up very high, and you're going to be brought down very low, and you'll end up being the tail. And I won't get into the graphics of what a tail does on most animals, what it serves as a purpose, but it's a very demeaning term that the Almighty uses for those that would be disobedient to him over time, to where he says, okay, then the stranger among you is going to rise up very high, the alien. You're going to be brought down very low, and you become the tail and not the head, with all the tragedy of this recent policeman example that was killed, young man, up and coming, dearly beloved by his fellow officers. It's been recently a funeral, just punctuating how tragic it is when we see the hand of the Almighty withdrawing the hedge of protection, as we see with what it says here in Deuteronomy 28, I think it's in verse 43, 44 along there, and we're going to be brought down very low, and we'll end up being the tail and not the head. Woe unto us when we see this unfolding with this major issue that just doesn't seem to go away. Just like you said, John, it just keeps coming back like a bad penny all these years, where there can't be a common cause resolution of this problem of hemorrhaging away our sovereignty, and all the harm of even California proposing to be a sanctuary state and seceding from the whole union, like the principle that Yeshua said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. I see this going to come up probably in the Torah, this issue of one who is evil and sovereign in their influence, that wants to hold back what the Creator wants to do to liberate people from the iron furnace of bondage we're in now in this country. It surely is what happened 3,000 plus years ago in Mitzrayim, in Egypt.
Yes. And Tom, I wanted to make mention of this because I don't know if you all were able to hear this and what happened on this day in history, but think about the shift that's taken place that though they're supposed to swear to uphold the Constitution and to protect our nation from of from enemies, foreign and domestic, this year has highlighted the number of communists and socialists that have been brought into the U.S. Congress. But in 1920, 5 duly elected socialist assemblymen were denied by the New York State Assembly. So how far have we come? In 1920, in New York, in the New York State Assembly, socialists were denied their duly elected position because they were socialists. And yet today, they've been elected into Congress, who their very ideology is unconstitutional. James, I'm going to let you have the last word to wrap up this segment and take us on into the Haftarah Brit Hadashah. So what are your last thoughts there?
We have become very far from our roots. It seems like we've become far from all of our roots nowadays. The church has lost its Hebraic roots. America's losing their constitutional, the values, the things that make us a country. Just as I don't know if you or Tom said it, but basically, without borders, you're not a country.
Exactly.
I mean, it's insane. But yeah, we there's that lady who's speaking out and saying that she wants to impeach Trump right now. She doesn't hold the values that are in the Constitution. And yet this lady somehow it's insane. I fought for this country, and I look now and I say, man, what were we fighting for? What were we fighting for? Because we sure as heck weren't fighting for the Constitution. If we were, then we would uphold it and we would agree with it, but we don't, or we would fight for it and we would do the things that are in it. Instead, just like people love it lawlessly, they love lawlessness and they love it. And that's what we've become. We've become a lawless nation. The church has become lawless, and all together we want to be the kings of our own heart, and that's what it all has to do with. So we're going to move into the Haftarah.
Yeah. So what do you got for us? Are you taking the Haftarah today? Or the Brit?
I am going to take the Haftarah.
Okay.
I'm going to take the Haftarah, which is Jeremiah 46:13 through 28. I'm going to read it real quick. It's not very long, and then kind of talk about it. So the word of Yahweh spoke to Jeremiah the prophet about King Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon to strike the land of Egypt, declare it in Egypt, and proclaim it in Migdol, and announce it in Noph and Taphanes. Say, stand up and get ready, for the sword has devoured all around you. Why are your strong ones swept away? They did not stand up, because Yahweh thrust him down. They keep stumbling, yes, falling over each other. And then they said, get up. Let's return to our own people, the land of our birth, Mayway from the oppressor's sword. They cried there, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, is but a noise. He let the opportune time pass. As I live, declares the king, whose name is Adonai Zavat, or Yahweh of righteousness. Like Tabor among the mountains, or like Carmel by the sea, so surely he will come. O daughter dwelling in Egypt, get your bags ready for exile, for Noph will become a ruin laid waste, uninhabited. Egypt is a beautiful heifer, but a biting fly is coming. From the north it is coming. Even her mercenaries among her are like stall-fed calves, for they also will turn back. They will flee away together. They will not stand up, for the day of their calamity has come upon them, in the time of their visitation. Its sound will hiss like a snake as they march with an army and come against her woodcutters with axes. They cut down her forest. It is a declaration of Yahweh, though it was impenetrable, for they are worse than locusts. They are without number. The daughters of Egypt is disgraced, handed over to a people of the north. Yahweh of righteousness, the Elohim of Israel, say, behold, I will punish Ammon of No, Pharaoh of Egypt, with her gods and her kings, even Pharaoh, and them that trust in him. I will hand them over to those seeking their lives, and hand into the hand of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon and his servants. Yet afterwards it will be inhabited as in the days of old. It is a declaration of Yahweh. But you fear not. This is the part we're going to kind of discuss. But you fear not, Jacob or Israel, my servant, nor be dismayed, O Israel. For behold, I will save you from afar, your offspring from the land of their exile. And Jacob will return and be at peace and secure, no one frightening him. Fear not, Jacob, my servant. It is a declaration of Yahweh, for I am with you. I will make a full end of the nations where I've driven you, but I will not make a full end of you. I will discipline you with justice, but will not utterly destroy you. In my opinion, this is just kind of where I'm going with this, is that this is the reason I think this ties into the Exodus and what's going on there is this is going to be our second Exodus. This is a part of it. And now I know this was talking about the time that Nebuchadnezzar was, taking over Egypt, but I do believe that there's going to be a second Exodus in our day. And what I mean by that is that if you read the book of Revelation, we kind of talked about this in our Torah study among friends yesterday or Saturday on the Shabbat, but all the plagues, all the things that happened in Exodus happen in Revelation, and it's because the two tie together. And what I mean by this is that Yahweh there's a verse where it talks about he's going to open the waters, he's going to make a way back for us to get back to the land, and it's going to be a day that'll never be forgotten. Tom mentioned this on the Shabbat, that we will no longer remember the first Exodus because this is going to be even greater. And that's the awesome thing about this. But it says here, the thing that I find awesome is that this is where we got to find our trust, to find our faith in, is that he says, hey, I'm going to destroy the lands around you. I'm going to destroy the people around you. But you, Jacob, you, Israel, and we are grafted in. We are Israel through Messiah Yeshua. We are a part of the commonwealth of Israel. And so we got to put our faith and trust in. It says, I have driven you, but I will not make a full end of you. He's going to discipline us. He's going to mold us as the potter molds his clay, but we are going to be brought back to the land. We're going to be brought back to him, and he is going to do an amazing thing. And I believe he's going to happen in our generation. I could be wrong, but I believe it's going to happen in our generation. But what do you guys think about that?
Well, James, one of the things I was just thinking is I agree. I agree with you. I believe that is, I think we're the generation to see the return of Yeshua. And, our Torah portion is called Bo, which means come. It also means go. And so there's a double meaning there. But I mean, we actually have to think about this because we're watching things unfold. Some people have actually, we could also look at the perspective. Maybe we're seeing things happening. Maybe there's going to be a delay. Maybe we're way ahead of our time. But I think everything's really aligning prophetically to show us that this is the time of the end, and that we've got to get our houses in order. And it makes me kind of give pause to think, considering the article that we just talked about, is that Yahweh says that he's going to make a full end of the nations. And then he also says this, and Jacob shall return undisturbed. So here we are. Jacob is spread out through all of the nations of the world, and yet the nations of the world will come to a full end. My goodness, that's pretty serious. And yet he's promising, I'm not going to destroy you. You're not going to be left unpunished. In other words, you're going to go through this thing, but you're going to be purified. You're going to be my bride when you come out. So I just think about what are the verge of the things that's going on in our culture right now. And we're looking at Russia has moved nuclear bombers into Venezuela. We've got Iran, who has nuclear capabilities, that have moved their naval fleet into the Atlantic. There's all sorts of things that are happening to where, for us as Americans, we're saying, well, it looks like our borders are being encroached upon, probably for the first time in our history. And yet, let's not forget about what's happening in Europe and in other nations of the world. Nobody should forget about where we're at. There's an invasion in Europe. There is all sorts of things that are happening in the Ukraine. The stuff happening in Africa. We sent some troops down to Africa here during this last week. Things are going on. We've got threats from China. So, Tom, what are your thoughts?
I recall years ago when I was in another organization that was following Torah. They were rather weak when it comes to the gifts of the Holy Spirit, but everything else prophetically that they were speaking about clear back in the early 60s and 70s along in there was what we're discussing today. And Yeshua talks about, it's a plural, a global phenomenon. He talks about the distress of the nations. He talks about through the prophet Jeremiah in the 30th chapter that it's time of Yaakov, we're discussing Yaakov or Jacob's trouble, like a man grabbing his loins in travail. Now, I've been involved in midwifery and helped deliver babies, and it came to me rather clearly that men don't have the ability to handle the pain that a woman does in childbirth. Maybe passing a kidney stone might come somewhat close to that I've helped people with that kind of affliction. It's a time of trouble, so it was not since the beginning, of the world, nor he says, indeed, ever shall be again. It's so problematic globally. And except for the sake of the elect, those that are the remnant seed that's been, like we were just hearing about, James, you're pointing out the end of that portion in the Haftarah, that's going to be spared, no flesh would be saved. It's not talking about salvation spiritually. There would be the annihilation of the people on this earth with the thermonuclear interchange capability we have now, or perhaps in this country just through a coronal mass ejection. When we read in Luke 21 about signs in the sun, like the Carrington effect back in the 1800s, it fried all the wires and caught on fire the telegraph offices, or an EMP bomb that could wipe out all of the electronics we're using here, the internet, cell phones, tablets, the whole 9 yards, even gasoline pumps, and throw us right back into the Stone Age. There's many different frightening scenarios. And I think it was brought up on that Torah Friends broadcast on the Sabbath. I may have, or somebody else brought it up, might have been you, James. That's the program I do, The Secret Place. That's not meant to be a plug. It's from Psalm 91. The Spirit showed me years ago, that is the hope of the remnant of Israel. With all that's said there is so drastic, and yet no plague will come near wherever your haven is, your dwelling. Only with your eye will you see this mega destruction going on around you, because your heart is loyal, is loving towards the Almighty. You're an obedient child. What an encouraging word that is in the 91st Psalm. With this trouble that's coming down globally, we have never had the ability with our technology to bring global total annihilation of this planet. And this is what causes me to realize that what I was looking for almost 50 years ago, it's reaching like a symphony, a grand smash crescendo. When the heavens are rolled back like a scroll and they see the Messiah, him whom they have pierced, and they mourn as an only son, it says, and we're gathered up as his elect and transported supernaturally by his holy Malachim, his angels, over to the Mount of Olives as a scenario. And then he will be king over, hallelujah, all the earth, as we read in Zechariah 4, I think it's verse 9 along in there. But at any rate, that's the scenario that's unfolding, and it's a time of trouble, like he said, that will never be like again. It's that severe upon all this earth. And yet he has the ability, and he did it just clearly back in Egypt when he brought the firstborn out of Goshen, and those that were the Girdashah that were in the households of the Israelites. And then we get into the Torah, I like to, for the end of this Torah portion, I like to mention there was a more remarkable corollary between the portion there at the end of this Torah portion, Exodus 13, and the mark of the beast in Revelation 13. But I don't want to do too fast run ahead on that. But we're living in times that's like Charles Dickens said in The Tale of Two Cities, it was the best of times. I'm not laughing because it's not funny. And it's the worst of times. It's a paradox, because we're told to look up when we see all these things coming to pass. Yeshua says, look up, because your redemption is drawing near. Hallelujah.
Amen. I just wanted to mention this as y'all were talking about this is how there was a prophetic word from Henry Groover that he had received. It was a vision that he had received, and I heard him talking about it, and it said, he talked about these camps. Now get this, Henry Groover is a prayer walker, and he has walked through the city streets of the nations of the world, through different major cities all over the world, praying for those cities and interceding for the people of those places, and left his family at home while he did this, and would go back and as a result of walking through that and making such sacrifice, God's given him a lot of different visions that he has shared with what he's seen about the times that we're living in and the end of the age. And one vision that he talked about was how there would come a time in America where the people in America, believers in America, would move out of the city into camps. This is Henry Groover. He's not Hebrew roots. He would move out of the city into camps, and that there were these invading armies that were coming through the land, and where these camps were, they were praising, they were worshiping, and they were interceding, and they were praying. And as the invading armies were passing through, they just split around the camps as if they weren't even there. And they just split around them and continued on, leaving the people alone and unharmed. What an amazing thing. But when I heard that, I was like, wow, what a picture of the Exodus camps and the protection of Yahweh. James, I'm going to let you have the last word, and then we'll move into the Torah portion with Tom.
Well, I mean, that's that. I never heard that before. That's awesome. What the guy's name was? Henry Groover. Is that what you were saying?
Henry Groover. Yeah, you can look him up on YouTube.
I will.
Yeah.
But that's and that's how I see it. Like I was the one that kind of mentioned it with Tom the other day, because the secret place, that was like the very first verse that I remember, like when I started, like kind of as Yahweh started opening my eyes to things. That was the one thing that I remember reading and going, what? How do I get to this secret place? I wanted to know, like, there's a place that you're protected. How do you get there? But yeah, I truly believe that is going to be, there's going to be a place of refuge. There's going to be a place that we are going to seek in those times, and that those who love him, and that means those who obey him, will be in that refuge. Those who want to be with the Father will be there, and those are going to be the wise virgins, in my opinion. They're going to be the ones who are protected when the times of trials come. But I want to get into the Torah portion, so we don't have a lot of time, so we'll kind of move on.
Okay. All right, Tom, take us to the Torah portion today.
Most assuredly I will. And by the way, I first learned of Henry Groover through my dear wife here, Retta Jo, many years ago, with her awareness of his remarkable accuracy and prophecy about safe havens. And her late husband, John Trescott, and her set up this as a refuge many years ago with freeze-dried food. I could go on and on, seeing the reality of what is coming and how we individually will be potentially one of those havens for people who will survive the time of Jacob's trouble.
Henry Groover's wife and Henry invited John and me to spend the night at their home in Nebraska as we were going through. So, and we've heard him at several prophecy conferences.
Okay, into the Torah portion here, folks. And Exodus 10 starts at this point here with these plagues. There's these multiple plagues that are for the very purpose of showing who the true creator is, not this snake god orientation, Ra, all that, with the man of the so-called great house, Pharaoh, who tells Moses impudently that he doesn't even never heard of this deity, when he and Aaron confront the, quote, little god G of Egypt and the individual of Pharaoh. And of course, every time you see that
Just mute microphone. What's wrong?
No, the microphone is not muted. That's why it's working. You see it down here. It's okay. Yeah, they're hearing me. So consequently, this confrontation with light and dark, we talked about darkness earlier, with good and evil, and with the spokesman for Moses, with the humorous situation of him thinking he's too slow of speech using Aaron, and the snake encounter with the magicians, Janus and Jambres, as they describe in the New Testament. Then we come on the scene here in the 10th chapter of Exodus, and it says, Yahweh said to Moses, go, that's why this portion is called go, to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart. Why does that happen? I remember years ago there was someone at a traffic signal that was not moving, and I gently tapped the horn, and he just looked back because I was trying to make an appeal. Could he just move through the intersection? And so he just stiffened his neck and sat there. And I tapped the horn a little louder, and I realized the more I tried to urge him, the more his heart was hardened. And so he had free will. It's rather deep when you go to Romans 9 about he'll harden whom he hardens. But when you make an appeal to someone who is unconverted, quite often it just hardens their heart all the more. And that's what's happening here. This evil leader of the Egyptian empire had free will. He wasn't a puppet, but I have no doubt that he was an instrument of Satan, the devil. And so he says here that you go and harden his heart and the hearts of his officials, so that I may do these miraculous signs of mine among them, and so that you may, here it is, tell your son and your grandson. It's always geared to the next generation, because Yahweh is a mishkapah. He's a family. He's concerned about the next ensuing generation, not just the one that's extant at the time. So it goes into a multiple generational prophecy here, that you may tell your son, your grandson, how severely I dealt with the Egyptians. And here we are 3,000 plus years later, still speaking about this remarkable phenomena of deliverance of Yahweh's people. I dealt with the Egyptians, performed miraculous signs among them, and you will know that I am Yahweh. And so it goes on about how Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and told him, this is what Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, says, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go that they may worship me. I would suspect in the near future there will be a confrontation between someone in an evil position in this world and those that are raised up. We know it's going to be the two witnesses, for example, in the book of Revelation, and they're going to say, let these people go. Stop this oppression on them, because we see clearly that Paul says in 1 Corinthians 10 that this Exodus is an example upon us, upon whom the ends of the world are come, a pattern that's set here that will occur again in the last days. You see this in the 4th chapter of Deuteronomy, where it says, and when you're in tribulation in the latter days, Moses there is a stenographer of, I believe, the pre-incarnate Messiah, saying in the latter days you're going to have tribulation again. And we're seeing it, and we've been discussing it all over the planet. It's happening today. But he says, but if you refuse to let my people go, then tomorrow I will bring locusts in your territory. I've seen in Texas where locusts just came in, and because I was raised in part on a farm, and just devastated a crop. And just even eat up fiberglass screens on windows, for pity's sakes. I mean, this is a phenomenon that was back then, and it's going to occur again, as I understand, the last days. So when you walk through these different plagues, like the darkness, where the Israelites had light in their home, when there was darkness, where you couldn't even see your hand in front of your face among the other people of Egypt, these confirmations that go against every demon god that was involved, at least the principal ones in Egypt, where Yahweh comes in and says, this God is nothing, and shows in a mocking fashion how pitifully inadequate their gods are, and then moves on to the next plague and the next, systematically going through and demolishing their idols. And I believe this is what he wants to do in every individual's heart that's trying to follow him. Whatever idols we have in our heart, if we submit to him, he will reveal to us every single one of them that has to be demolished in our hearts. It surely is on a mega scale for that whole nation of Egypt. And interesting enough, if you read this whole account here, the Israelites had favor in the eyes of many of the Egyptians. Oh, there was the taskmasters that were inducing harm to them. By the way, in Goshen this very day, some of the best clay in the world is there to make bricks. That's even a confirmation of what went on 3,000 plus years ago. But you move on here, and we're running out of time here, but it culminates all these different plagues in this confirmation of what Moses was told at the burning bush, that he for a time lost and had to be reminded, look, I warned you that Pharaoh was not going to listen to you. And there are major appeals today to leaders with people who are rising up. I know Red and I have been praying for a long time that people with prophetic voice will cry aloud, spare not, lift up their voices like a trumpet, like a shofar, and show my people their sins. And speaking truth to power like John the Baptist did with Herod. And yet they will refuse to listen. This is prophesied as well, as surely as it was what happened with Pharaoh. But the culmination of this is just remarkable. When you get up to the 13th chapter in this Torah portion of Exodus 13, notice this. It says we're supposed to explain to our children, I think in this day, the significance of the Exodus as surely as the Israelites were told to speak to their children. And on that day, it says, and it's during the days of Pesach, protection, deliverance, unleavened bread, explain to your children or son, it says here, this is because of what Yahweh did for me when I came out of Egypt. I suspect we'll be telling our children when we're delivered out of the bondage of this world as a remnant in the Great Tribulation, we're to tell our children similarly what was said to these ancient Israelite children. What they did for me when I came out of Egypt, let it serve as a sign for you on your hand and a reminder on your forehead. Really? So here we have this blood covenant activity with the Pesach, the Passover. And yet in Revelation 13, we read here that there is this corollary about the permission to give a spirit to the image of the beast. This is Revelation 13:15, so that the image of the beast could both speak and cause whoever would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And requires everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave or servant, to be given a mark on his right hand. Remember what it just said back in Exodus 13, and on his forehead. What you do with your hand and what is right here in your central processing unit, your cerebral cortex, where you make decisions. On the right hand and on your forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, the beast's name, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Then it speaks about the one who has understanding must calculate the number of the beast, because there's a number of a man, number being 666. I submit to anyone there's a corollary between what will be a danger to people in this world when they submit to this beast system that's described by Yeshua on Patmos to John so many years ago, 2,000 plus years ago. And what is the corollary and the antidote of that, of having what is said here in Exodus 13 that's directly and not coincidentally tied in with the Passover and the very foundation of the walk we have with him with all his Moedim, his holy days. Now, that's what I believe is part of this. I don't say I understand all of it. I've only been studying this, and I'm not being sarcastic, for about 50 years. And this is deep stuff, folks. But as you go to prayer and you look at his word, our Messiah has promised that he will lead you into all truth by the Holy Spirit. And you'll have understanding, and you will be protected as you love and serve him. And you won't be part of this wretched mess in the world of what these people are going to have to endure. This worse than any time since the beginning of the world, Yeshua says. But this is my read here on what's so critical in Exodus after all these plagues. It culminates in explaining to our children why all these things are happening and how we can have this mark of the Spirit from what's pictured in the beautiful sacrament of the Passover in our hand and on our foreheads, and not be part of this beast system with such terrible warnings of what happens to people who embrace that satanic deception.
All right. Yeah, very good, Tom. I appreciate that. And I really appreciate you connecting those dots of what's on our forehead, what's on our hands in terms of the following of Yahweh's Moedims. You know, those are the connection points, as opposed to not following. Could not following be the sure mark of the beast system? James, what are your thoughts?
There's also a verse where it talks about following the commandments. They're supposed to be wrapped around. This is why they wrap the I forget what it's called, like a black thing. Yeah, the tefillin, they wrap it around their arm, and basically they wear the little box on their forehead. And the whole point is that the commandments are supposed to be wrapped around our arm and or basically on our hand and our forehead too. Something else I want to question here, and it just kind of hit me. I grew up Catholic. You know, they do that like whole entire sign of the cross thing. I like, not saying that's it. I mean, I know that's not it, but I do believe that the one that brings in this will have something to do with that church. But I do know the commandments are supposed to be, we're supposed to be remembering them. They're supposed to be basically something that's on our minds constantly. And we should be every day thinking of them. And every minute as we walk, we should be basically bringing them to fruition and walking in them, because, that's how we produce fruits. That's how the people see that we walk in righteousness when we obey our Father. We know that we love him when we obey his commandments, and they're not burdensome. And we know that we love the children of God when we obey his commandments. Those are the two greatest commandments. And, the thing is that when we walk out the 613 commandments, when we walk out his laws, there's how many traffic laws in this world? I mean, in our country, what is it, 5,000? I think they said there's 5,600 traffic laws. We can obey them somehow, but we can't obey 200 and some that pertain to us. It's insane. But kind of off topic, but there's just, we're walking in times like never before. And the thing is that it's time that we get our hearts right. It's time that we do what we, instead of just speaking it, we've got to walk the walk. We no longer be a people who talk it. We have to walk it.
Okay. Yeah. Very good. Very good. Well, hey, that really wraps it up for us today here on, Let Us Reason Together. And I do want to remind everybody that if you like what you're listening to and you like what's going on here on Lamb Radio, give us the thumbs up and share this link, put it on your Facebook. And by the way, there's some other, they got Facebook out there. There's a new social connection site called MeWe that's out there, and there's Gab AI that's out there as well. I mean, Facebook is going down, so we need to have other places to communicate, and they're actually better because they're not going to censor the free speech. So
I'm on MeWe. I signed up for that the other day.
Did you? Okay, right.
Yeah.
Well, very good. Yeah, we need to connect there. So there is some other places that we can have this word go out and let it not be censored by those that are trying to control our free speech. And so I want to encourage everybody to do that. I also want to let everybody know, as a reminder, that you can stay up to date with what's happening here with the Lamb Ministries, and that is by their Facebook page, by our Facebook page and Lamb Radio. You can find out what's going on, keep up to date with who is going to be coming up and the programming that's going on. Also, email updates. They're sent out every other Sunday morning. So this coming Sunday will be the next round of emails to give us updates of what's happening, and the Lamb Events Bulletin Board found on the MessianicLambRadio.com page. We have sponsors as well, and you can go to MessianicLambRadio.com, go in there and see who our sponsors are and the great products and ministries that they have. They are supporting this ministry, and when you support them, it helps this ministry as well. And then, of course, when you donate to Lamb Radio, you are a sponsor, and we appreciate all of your donations that you are sending in to help keep this ministry up and going. Want to remind everybody that tomorrow at this time for Let Us Reason Together is the Chameleon Church. You want to make sure you stay tuned for that. Biblical Antidotes for the Modern Man with Alan Aguirre, with co-hosted by Jamie Louie, Tom Collins, and Rabbi Daryl Weinberg. So don't miss out on tomorrow's programming. Of course, all the other programming here on this channel on YouTube for Lamb Radio. And by the way, I want to say thank you, James and Tom, for joining me and being my co-hosts today. I appreciate y'all's inputs and everything that you've had to say. I glean from you all being part of this show and this programming. So thank you so much. Well, y'all willing, we'll be back on Monday next week. And so looking forward to that. And until next time, I have to say, shalom.